Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to showcase the PatternMaker Pro memorization feature. And if you're not aware, PatternMaker Pro is software for creating sewing patterns. It's a drafting software. It has a number of really unique features in it. One of them is the ability to lay out your patterns to figure out how much fabric you're going to need. It also has a full grading system in it. But perhaps the most unique thing is the memorization system. And to the best of my knowledge, this doesn't exist in any other software. So generally, you start off with a flat pattern block or sloper, and then you use that as a starting point to create original designs using pattern manipulation. The process leads to a lot of repetitive drafting. I may want 3 inches of ease in the sloper for one design, and then maybe I want 6 inches for another one for a jacket. And I'd have to redraft that basic block pattern over and over to change the ease values. Personally, I don't deal well with repetition at all. I have a real issue with it, and that's one of the reasons that I created this software. So let me show you what you can do. I'm going to open up just a regular draft that I have. So this draft was created using the 001 tutorial. Let me show you over on the website. It's right here, the Easy Fit knit block if you want to create this. It was created using Susan's measurements. And you can see over here it says specifically that this was memorized when it was created. So let's export this out as a memorized draft. It's File, Memorized Draft, Export Draft. We can give this a different name. I'm just going to stick with what it says. Now let's recall that draft. I'll just go up to File, Memorize Draft, import the draft, select what I just exported. And now it says, what do you want to call it? We'll just leave it like this, Susan Draft Restore. And I'm going to select Susan's measurements and continue. Now this brings up measurement mapping interface. These are the names of the measurements I used during the draft, and that's part of the formula process of memorizing. If you're not familiar with that, I would suggest that you watch the Getting Started video. I explain this whole process. So the program tries to automatically match up what the names were used during the draft, and since this is the same measurements, that it matched up perfectly. And you'll notice that all the ease values, the armhole drop, the across back ease, bust ease, and wrist ease are set to 0. And I do this intentionally on initial drafts. But this time I want to change these values on the recall. So let's put an inch on the armhole drop. Notice I have to enter millimeters because that's what the set that I chose is in. So on the across back ease, let's add an inch there. On the bust ease, let's add 3 inches. And let's add an 1.5 inches on the wrist. So I'll accept all these measurements and create the set. So there's the restore. PatternMaker Pro takes all those measurements that were mapped and it creates a brand new fresh set. It doesn't put those ease values in Susan's list or anything. It created a whole new one that goes specifically with this recall. So let's go ahead and save this. And restored drafts cannot be memorized themselves because there's no history. If you look up here, it's on version 1. And you can definitely do complete pattern manipulation from this point forward. Everything you do will be saved and you can undo those steps, but you just can't undo anything here. Obviously, it's just one thing. So when PatternMaker Pro created this recall, it also created a new set. Let me show that to you. It has the same name as the recall did. It contains all the measurements that were used during the import process. I saved a copy of that original draft in SVG form, so let's bring that in right on top of this one. So File, SVG, Import. Here's the original. And you can see it worked. The armhole is dropped on the bodice as well as on the sleeve draft. We've got more room here in the bust. You can also see the across back ease has been added. The wrist is wider. But all the important measurements that we didn't mess with, like her center length and her overarm measurements, those are held. It looked them up and they were the same. So you can sit here and change ease values. You could change other values too if you wanted to, and just recall that draft indefinitely. And then you have new starting points for pattern manipulation for creating original designs. But now let's see what happens when I choose my measurement set and not Susan's. So I'll come up and do the same thing, import the draft. And this time I'm going to, first of all, change the name, put my name up here. You got to be careful about that so you know what you used when you restore. And I'm going to select my set. Now notice my set's in inches, Susan's was in millimeters. It doesn't matter. PatternMaker Pro understands that, and all the conversions will happen automatically. So let's continue. This time on the mapping, it wasn't quite as successful. You'll see we've got some warnings over here. The neck circumference, it found neck in my set, which is correct. It's the same thing. So we'll stay with that. And then on the bust circumference, it didn't find anything. My set is called bust chest. So we'll just add that in. Now I'm going to leave the ease values at 0 and accept this and create it. And there's my measurement set. We'll save this. And now let's bring in that original draft from Susan. And you can see there is a drastic difference here. Susan and I are not the same person. So let's try this again. Up until this point, this draft has consisted of 2 people with busts. We have what I refer to as the X body type. Let's use something completely different. This time we're going to select Jim. And Jim is what I would consider the Y body type. He doesn't have breasts. So this is completely different. Obviously, you'd want to make sure you're using a pattern that was drafted for all body types. If this had bust darts or something, we might have some problems. But it's a pretty straight draft. So let's continue. And his measurements all matched up. He had the same name on his set, so we'll accept that. And there's Jim's draft. So I saved my SVG out off camera. So let's bring that in. Let's compare it. And now let's bring Susan's back in. So you can see that there's a lot of difference here between these 3 individuals. We've got height difference, width differences. I can draft a complete pattern in literally seconds using different measurements. And so I only had to draft the original one time. Now this pattern is a super simple one, and we got no errors, nothing went wrong. Things can go wrong. This is a pretty complex process. So let me point out some of the things you need to keep in mind. So let me show you a few things that you might want to be aware of when you're working with the program and memorizing the drafts. The first one is these curve points. When you create a curve and then you drag the curve points to shape the curve, those movements are saved. But those might not be the movements that apply to a completely different measurement set because there's no correlation. You're not telling PatternMaker Pro anything specific. You're just moving them and it's keeping track of how you moved them. So it's a really good idea, as is done in this case, to create these reference points that the curve runs through. And then when you recall the pattern, you can easily come up to the curve menu on the move curve points and just grab them and make sure that they align with where you intended them to be. So that's one thing to watch out for, is you might need to finesse your curves a little bit on a recall. So you're probably wondering what exactly happens when the draft runs into an error and fails. So let's set up a scenario that I know will cause that to happen. So I've got a fresh draft here. I'm just going to put a point here. And then I'm going to activate Susan's measurements to use for this. So load active set, and I'll choose Susan. Let's draw a line using a quarter of her bust measurement. So I'm going to use point from point, select this one, and then add her bust circumference divided by 4. Preview that, and there's the point right there. Now let's draw a line. And now let's create a circle to intersect our line. I'm going to start here at the top, and I'm going to put a radius of 10 inches on this. And now I'm going to find the intersection, selecting the circle and the line. And there's our little intersection point. Now I'm going to create another point out here in space somewhere and draw a line, connecting our intersection point and our new point, and save that. So my draft is done. Now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to export this as a memorized draft. So I want to point out that I have a bunch of other stuff that I created on this. So this is up to version 26. So keep that in mind. So let's go out and let's restore or import this draft. And this time I'm going to use my measurements. And I have to tell it which bust measurement. Mine is called bust chest, because that's the only measurement that was used. And we have a fail. So it says that there was an error loading the draft, the memorized command on version 26, and this is my little function name so that it might give you a little bit of an idea of what the program was trying to do that failed. It was trying to draw a line. And version 26 of your original draft has failed. Please review this version of your original to locate possible issues. Measurement set value differences can often be the cause, which is absolutely what happened here. So I'll say okay. Now it went as far as it could go in the draft here in the window, so I can kind of see. You didn't see any of this other stuff. I had it on other layers that were hidden. But there is our circle that we created right here. And you can see that this line did not intersect. Let's go back to our original draft. It said that the failure was on version 26. And that might seem a little strange to you because it was the intersection point that didn't get created. Why didn't it fail when that point wasn't created? And the reason is that it didn't know that it wasn't there until we went to use it. So just putting it there didn't alert the program that there was an issue. It was when we tried to select it to make this line that it said, you're not making a line because there's no point here to make it with. So you'll need to kind of think through what the error is. So the best way to guarantee that your drafts will import is to test them during development. And it's really easy to work through your draft, pause, export it, import it, and use a completely different set of measurements and watch what happens. And this will allow you to catch problems before you get too deep into your draft. This process is very complex. There's a lot going on, and there are things that can happen that can cause it to fail. I don't want you to get into version 100 and then decide to test it and find out that it failed way back. I've done that. It's not fun to go back and undo and then have to redo it again. because you made a bad choice. So watch out for that. The other thing that you can do to avoid the errors is to use the variable values, use the formulas. People are different. And if you use something correlated to their body, you'll have less failure. If you encounter a draft instruction that says to use 4 inches somewhere, think about it. Could you use a wrist measurement instead, or something else that's close to the length that they're describing? The odds of that failing on you on a recall are much less because that line will adjust based on that person's measurements. Keep that in mind as you're working, and you'll encounter few problems with this program. So that's a brief introduction to the PatternMaker Pro memorization system. I don't think you'll find anything like it currently available on the market. It allows you to create custom patterns for people using their exact measurements. As you see here, it allows you to create very original designs, knowing that you can recall them anytime that you wish. You can sell your custom patterns or share them with friends and family. You can also sew custom garments that will absolutely amaze your customers because they will fit perfectly. And I encourage you to test all this functionality before you buy the program. We have a full-featured demo over at PatternMakerPro.com. We're confident you'll love working with PatternMaker Pro when you give it a try. If you have any questions or comments about the software, leave them below and I will address those. And I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you later.